F-22 versus Su-75. Who wins this fight might actually surprise you. We're gonna dive into these two beasts going head to head. Let's dive in. Let's talk about the Su-75 Checkmate first. This is an aircraft that I studied extensively and thought about dogfighting it many a times. When it comes to what the Su-75 reminds me of, it's the X-32, which was a competitor with the F-35. The X-32 has a divertless supersonic intake in the front, and that intake is meant to bring in air and also keep the jet having a stealth signature. And with the X-32, it was actually meant to bring in enough air to do a short field takeoff and a vertical landing. The big difference between the Su-75 and the X-32 is that the Su-75 is not meant to do a short field takeoff or a vertical landing, which is most likely one of the reasons why the intake on the X-32 is so much bigger. But at the end of the day, the Su-75, that intake being so small, is going to be great for stealth, but there is going to potentially be a problem with enough air being able to get into that chin take. And yeah, I said it, chin take, because look at the thing. It looks exactly like a chin take. And then the X-32, it looks like someone just is surprised all the time, like their mouth is just sitting there wide open. So it's no surprise to me why the X-32 didn't exactly go into production. All the generals sitting there watching it were just like, so the Su-75 is very similar to the F-35, and I'll do a comparison Su-75 versus F-35 in another video. Be sure to check that one out. With the Su-75 going against the F-22, let's talk about some of the facts behind the Su-75 that might actually make it a formidable enemy for the Raptor. The Su-75 can fly at 1,800 miles an hour and go up to speeds of Mach 1.8 or maybe even a little faster. It can carry a lot. 16,000 pounds is most likely what this thing can carry. It's got thrust of 24,000 pounds, and in max afterburner, probably somewhere around 36,000 pounds of thrust, so nothing to shake a stick at. It most likely uses the Isabelle 30, which is the same engine used on the Su-57. All the variants of the Su-75 that I've seen don't have thrust vectoring capability, so most likely that'll be one of the biggest limiting factors of the Su-75 going up against the F-22. One of the biggest things is that the Su-75, the single engine stealth variant that Russia is coming out with, is essentially a cut and paste for the most part of the Su-57. Russia's essentially taking parts of the Su-57 and they're just plugging it in and creating a single engine version with the Su-75. So they're taking a lot of the same cockpit layout, the heads-up display, essentially all the same inner workings and avionics of the Su-57, and they're just ka-chink, putting those into the Su-75. So why is that good? Well, it's good because they're potentially getting to test those things out more. They're getting to test out the interoperability of the avionics in the Su-57, seeing what works and what doesn't with the couple Su-57s that are actually flying, and they're using that in the Su-75. Why is that bad? Well, it might not really be an advancement upon what Russia's already created, and they might just be checking a box and saying, look, we have a competitor with the F-35. Now, at the end of the day, the Su-75 is definitely built for a multi-role mission. The Su-57 has been making its way there, but the Su-75 is really meant as a multi-role fighter. It's got a lot of hard points, and as we talked about, 16,000 pounds of armament. This thing is meant to do air-to-ground missions in Syria or in Ukraine or in other places if they can actually get it produced and off the ground. They're also putting a low-cost ASA radar into the Su-75, which is again going to be a very similar variant of what's already in the Su-57. And it's worth noting that they want to export the Su-75, but what's most likely keeping it from even being produced at all are all the sanctions that are being put on Russia due to the Russia-Ukraine war, and also countries are starting to back out of the program. The United Arab Emirates was supposed to be one of the biggest buyers of the Su-75. They've essentially said, nah, see you later. They're actually looking into the F-35 now, so that's even further hindering the Su-75 production, as well as Russia's ability to get chips and other things that are needed to create the Su-75. They're just making it really hard on themselves with all the sanctions that are coming down on them. And it's worth me hitting when we compare the F-22 to the Su-75, they both have a heads-up display. Now to me, the fact that the Raptor still has a heads-up display and it hasn't been updated to be more like the F-35 is just weird. It's like, you've got this amazing aircraft, let's integrate the technology from the F-35 into the F-22. But they might just be saving that for the 6th generation fighter that's gonna replace the F-22. Got a video on that one coming as well. You know I've got to talk about a 6th generation fighter. So the fact that the Su-75 has a heads-up display is going to limit its ability to target in a 360-degree up and down, basically like a globe-shaped targeting structure. That's going to be really hard to do if you're relying more on the heads-up display. Now, with the Raptor, it's basically air to air. It's lurking up in the skies and it knows what's exactly in front of it. Raptor is pretty much always going to have situational awareness, so the heads-up display doesn't limit that quite as much. But with the limited capability of the avionics in the Su-75, having a heads-up display is going to limit its ability to target in a 360-degree area. So what are some of the pluses of the Su-75? Well, the fact that it's got the Isideli 30, that's a much more reliable Russian engine. It actually weighs a lot less than typical Russian engines have in the past, and it's got more thrust. So the reliability of this thing is probably going to be better than most Russian engines, and with a single engine configuration, that's going to be really important. And Russia better double down and make sure that they're focusing on the reliability of this thing so they don't just start losing Su-75s left and right due to engine failures. But when it comes to the F-22, the F-22's ability to just get up high and fight, how is that going to go going up against a Su-75? Well, glad you asked. Let's dive into what it would be like to be on visual range with the F-22 and the Su-75. So sitting in the Su-75, the wings on that thing are actually relatively large, which tells me that this thing is meant to maneuver and operate at higher altitudes. Probably 50,000 feet plus is where they want to operate the Su-75. So if that intake is able to get in enough air to keep that thing getting higher and higher, they're gonna go up as high as they can to try to get their missiles up to altitude. Now, the radar cross-section of the Su-75, while probably better than the Su-57, it isn't great. It's probably gonna be a little bit better than a clean F-18. So the Raptor is going to spot this thing hundreds of miles away. The Raptor is going to know where these things are, what they're doing. They're going to know what the pilots had for breakfast, what their family's like. The Raptor is pretty much going to know everything about the Su-75 prior to even getting anywhere close to a weapons envelope. So beyond visual range, the Raptor is going to have the clear advantage. Now, Russia's been doubling down on longer range air-to-air missiles. So who has the first launch opportunity? That's up for debate, but who's going to be able to see the other one first? It's definitely going to be able to be the Raptor, who's going to be lurking and just waiting for the call from higher headquarters that they're actually able to take a shot. And then let's say beyond visual range, no shots are fired and these two beasts meet in a dogfight. Well, the F-22 having the thrust vectoring capability and the Su-75 variants currently not having that, the advantage is obviously going to be on the Raptor. They can do what's called a falling leaf maneuver, where they basically turn into a helicopter mid-flight and just point their nose wherever they want to. And additionally, there has been new heat-seeking stealth missiles designed for the F-22. They're called the AIM-9X Block 2, and the body and structure of the missile itself is actually stealth. So when these things poke out the bottom of the F-22, it doesn't reduce their stealth characteristics, which is just wild. So the F-22 pilot is going to bust out that AIM-9X Block 2 and is just going to do his or her best to just start wailing away on the Su-75. Now, the Su-75's advantage is going to be maneuverability, but even though it doesn't have the thrust vectoring, it's still going to have a significant ability to maneuver. In my opinion, it's going to be more maneuverable than an F-18. So if this F-22 pilot isn't able to keep sight, then the Su-75 could put themselves in an offensive position behind an F-22. And crazy things can happen when an F-22 pilot's distracted, trying to do 20 things at once. One of these Su-75s could roll in and get a kill, although that would be extremely rare. You've got to maintain vigilance around this Su-75 no matter what you're flying, because as we like to say, there's no easy day, and you want to basically pretend like this Su-75 can do whatever it wants, can shoot down whatever it wants, so that you don't get cocky, so that you're able to stay in the fight and just wail away on this thing. So while the Su-75 is a super cool aircraft, I think the design elements of it are awesome. I think they took the X-32 and the F-35 and they made a pretty cool combination. So kudos to the West for designing it. Kudos to Russia for making it. And it'll be interesting to see if this thing actually gets off the ground. The rumor was that there'd be some of these produced in 2024, but with the Russian-Ukraine war, all the sanctions, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a production of this thing till 2030, or it potentially might be scrapped altogether, depending on what partner nations fall out. There's been rumors that Vietnam wants to buy some. There's also been rumors of African countries wanting to buy some. So how that all plays out will determine whether the Su-75 is actually built. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll catch you on the next video. Have a great day. Thanks again for watching the video, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It just helps me to grow the channel, and I really appreciate it. I will see you on one of these videos over here.